Okay, so here's another video, and this time I'm going to talk about a social recap video I made for the band Frontier. A social recap video is basically a video that recaps a gig and is put out on social. I don't really know why it's been given that kind of technical name. It basically just means here's a video of a show we played, and the whole point of these is basically advertisement. If you put out lots of content that makes your show look sick, people are probably going to want to come and see your show. So this Frontier one, I think, is kind of a perfect example of that. Largely down to how good the band are. I don't think it has too much to do with me, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the process of editing this video. I've taken all the kind of bells and whistles off of it and gone just back to the original cut, so I can run you through the process behind how I put these together. So let's jump into the worst program there's ever been, Premiere Pro, and we can take a look. Okay, so here we are inside of Premiere Pro, and I'm just going to do a quick bit of housekeeping in terms of how I organise my projects. The C-Log footage folder here is where all my raw footage goes. Here you can find some sequences, that's where I will tend to put finished sequences. The assets folder, logos, additional animations, brand related stuff, etc. Audio, any music and SFX clips. Layers is where things for colour grading and organisation and additional things like that tend to go. So what I'll do is pull all of my C-Log footage into this timeline, and then I'll cut up all the clips that I like so, and then I'll organise them all together, and then I will just start arranging my footage. So I'm going to give you a wee playthrough of the footage as is and talk through how it was shot. Frontier are a very aggressive, chaotic band live. The music is just as chaotic and aggressive, so I wanted the visuals to reflect that, which is easily done because their stage show is primarily strobe based, and they also throw themselves about a lot. So I just did my best to make sure that every moment in here something was happening, something energetic and aggressive was happening. There was no standing still, there's no cinematic gimbal movements, it's all handheld, and it's all shot, I believe, on the same lens, which is the Sigma 35mm f1.4. So I shot this at the same time as doing some stills, so I was switching in between the two, which makes life a bit more difficult sometimes, but I like being kept on my toes like that and doing both. It's quite a fun challenge. So the first thing I'll do when I'm doing one of these social recaps for a band is decide how I want the visuals to marry up with the music. So typically that tends to be... Typically when I'm editing one of these social recaps, I find the piece of music I want to use first of all. That tends to be a bridge into a final chorus, or something along the lines of a breakdown, some kind of big hooky bit of a song where I know there's going to be nice dynamics that I can tie up visuals to go alongside. That being the case with Frontier, they're very chaotic, so what I knew I wanted to be a slight build so I could then throw people into the chaos. I could have gone immediately into the chaos, which should have been quite high impact, but I like there to be ebb and flow and things. I feel that makes the chaotic bits feel more chaotic, and then knowing the band's music as well as I do, I knew there was a bit in the song Glitcher where I would be able to give myself a little bit of a build up, throw in some chaos, and then change the pace up a little bit towards the end while still keeping it in that kind of under a minute kind of spectrum that's ideal for these kind of videos. So that being the case, what I did was I went in and I took a look at the audio, and in the first instance I select the audio, make sure it's set to the music preset, and then I'll auto match it so that the music is matched to broadcast standards for loudness, so that it doesn't blow out anybody's speakers or anything like that. I'll also do the same with the VFX, but what I'll do for that is make sure that the audio type is set to VFX, obviously, or SFX I should say. I don't like to keep saying VFX, probably because I don't know what I'm doing. So continuing on the subject of not knowing what I'm doing, once I've done that, I will cut up the music. You can see there's a cut here, which is where I know I want the first shot to end, and then there's also a cut here, which is where I want there to be a change of pace, and then this final cut here, which is where the music ends and the SFX begins. Typically when I'm cutting, I tend to focus on cutting rhythmically,
unless there's something obvious like big guitar ring out or something like that. Partly because I feel those kind of big dynamics make the most sense when it comes to cuts, it gives them the most impact, and also because I'm not musically adept enough or at all to cut to anything else. Snare drums, kick drums, big hits, that's about all I can possibly manage, to be honest. But I find that keeps things pacey. It means that I am forced to decide where I want shots to end, and they have to line up with these moments for it to make sense, and I think that's helped my editing become a lot more concise, and in particular when you come to bands like this where it needs to be fast-paced, chaotic, bring the frenetic feeling of the band's live show to somebody's screen. Focusing very ruthlessly on rhythmically where I want shots to end stops me, even if it's a great 3-second shot of somebody throwing the guitar above their head, actually all I need is from the guitar flying from their shoulder to halfway down to really get the impact. I don't need the whole thing, not for something like this with this kind of musical backdrop.
So with that being done, I go back to my assembly cut, and then I have a quick run through, make sure that I'm happy with the footage. These gaps here I'll come to a bit later on when I talk about some of the more additional post-production elements.
This is how ahead of their time Frontier are. My Mac can't even keep up with them. Even machines aren't as advanced as Frontier, so there you go.
It's a good joke. It's so funny. I love it. Okay, that's enough of that. What I'll do at this point is save. Every time I complete a panel, I save, because Premiere crashes all the time. Maybe it's crashed 2 or 3 times in making this video, you'll never know, but it did. So at this point I then go on to my effects, which include colour grading. So I will take an adjustment layer and apply it across all the footage so that I don't have to apply the effects to every clip individually, because that would be incredibly time consuming and even more boring than this video already is. This first layer is my sharpening layer. I also apply a little bit of colour correction to that as well, which we'll talk about in a moment. I then do 2 layers of colour grading. The first layer deals with the C-Log footage, or nature of C-Log footage I should say. This is the boring bit. There's just lots of admin in creating stuff, filing, busy work. It's not that cool. Okay, so once I've done that, I go to this first layer and I jump into my effects panel. Inside of here, I go into effects and I find the sharpen effect, like so, and apply that. This just makes my footage a little bit sharper. It's not a huge concern for this video because I want it to be chaotic and frenetic and the shots are all quick. If there's a little bit of focus things, it kind of just adds to that chaos. I'm not too fussed about being sharpened, but it just makes everything look a little bit better, a little bit more cinematic, making sure it's all nice and sharp. Okay, so at this point it's time to start colour grading. So for clips like these typically I don't have to worry about a lot of change in lighting. It's all kind of the one scene, so it makes colour grading quite quick because I can throw out a couple of adjustment layers and apply it across the whole thing, which is great. It's really saves a lot of time for me, and it keeps all the footage looking pretty consistent. So I find a frame that I like. I like this frame of Dan here because he's a handsome boy and he's a nice man, and I like looking at him. Hope you're having fun up in the wild north, Dan. So I actually tend to do a lot of my colour correction still within the effects panel without really going to the colour panel. So I go into here and then I find my utility LUTs. So my camera, the Canon EOS R, I could really do with a Canon sponsorship and endorsement or something. Somebody could hook me up. It shoots video internally in 8-bit C-Log. C-Log's a really flat file format, which gives me a lot more dynamic range. So when I'm shooting in low light locations or anywhere else, I've got a lot more range in the footage to deal with colour grading, and it lets me have a lot more control about how I want the footage to look in the end than if I was just recording straight as a
a mauve, or with a film look already on top of it baked in, which I find is a bit easier, particularly with the low light stuff, because I don't necessarily want my images to look how it looks in a really dingy low lit club. That might not be that visually interesting, but if I'm able to keep a hold of all the details and then play about with that in post, I can kind of elevate the way the gig felt from a visual perspective anyway.
So I've got 5 of these. I'm going to go with LUT 4 because I know these quite well, and I'll just turn that off so you can see what that looks like without it. Flat, bit contrasty, bit more colour, looks a bit more normal, looks a bit less grey and dull. Once I've done that, I'll then do another little bit of colour correction in this basic correction panel in the sharpening layer. So
the reason I go back and do a little bit of primary colour correction after I've done that secondary layer of colour correction is because Premiere Pro, for reasons best known to Adobe, once you export from it, it loses a bit of contrast and it loses a bit of saturation. So I go and I apply that to this bottom layer, so all my other colour grade layers have this extra bit of contrast and saturation, so that even though, oh excuse me, this is where I should stop drinking and making these, but I'm not going to. You can, by adding in that extra amount of contrast saturation inside the project, when it exports, it might lose a little bit of it, but it'll still be in line with what I actually wanted it to be when I was working on it inside of Premiere. So that's just a little trick to make sure that my grades come out looking like how I actually made them inside of Premiere.
So having settled on that, I then usually bring the contrast up to about 20 because contrast is cool. Already that looks a lot more kind of dynamic and dramatic, and then I'll bring the saturation up to 115 just so there's a bit more saturation going on there. You can see that feels a bit more yellow. And then save before I go into my next layer of colour grading, which is the LUT.
So a LUT in filmmaking is essentially what's called a lookup table, and it's a table of numbers that apply to colours, and it tells your computer what way you want your colours to be rendered. So that's essentially what it is. That's where you get your kind of film looks, your more dramatic, interesting, stylised looks on top of your footage.
So once I'm in that layer 2, I go into this creative panel again and I just have a wee play about. Intensity wise, I tend to drop this quite far down to about 40. I don't want my footage to look too much like it's just or too intense, sorry. When it comes to a LUT, I just want to add that little bit of drama and style to things. So then what I do is I make sure I save as I go along and I have a wee play about. I've got a few that are kind of like go-to ones, and I have a wee play about, see how they look. And once I find one that I like, now it takes a wee bit of playing about. Some of them you want a bit more intensity on, some you want a bit less, and it kind of just depends. I quite like this one. This is actually a LUT I didn't have when I made this the first time. So what I do is when I feel like I found what I want, I just go back and I play the footage, see how I feel about it. At the moment, I feel pretty good about this. So I'll stick around with this flame.
Because for interior or fire, if I'm really on the ball, I'll put like a wee fire emoji or something here beside my tiny little girl sized hand.
Yeah, and I'll usually maybe up the vibrance a little bit just so the colours are getting a bit more dramatic. It's a faded film look here. If you want to put the contrast in a wee bit, I never want to do that. Play with the intensity a little touch more. Yeah, I like that. It feels like a kind of bleached film kind of look. Almost sort of Super 8-esque. So, pretty happy with that. Sometimes what I also do is that we play about with the tints, see how I feel about those. As it stands, I don't think the footage needs anything done to it from a tint perspective, and I just have a wee run through and I feel pretty happy with how that looks. As you can see, these kind of things here. What I'll sometimes do is then go into the primary correction a wee bit and I'll do things. So if I go into my scopes, I have a wee bit of a look, see how the colours feel overall, So having applied the looks I've already done, I've not actually got a pure black anywhere, and I want to always be a pure black and a pure white, so I just bring the blacks down a little touch, so I've got something touching 0, and then I'll just bring the highlights down a little touch so that's not as crushed, and make sure there's still a couple of wee dots that are not pure whites, so I'm quite happy with that. And maybe just bring the contrast up a little bit more, spread the wealth a bit. So if you follow, so this scope here, my Luma scope, is where I tell my black and whites are, and this tells you where the colours are in any one shot. So I can then use these sliders to push and pull if I feel an image is too green, too red, etc. As you can see, given all the strobe lights, it varies pretty wildly across this clip. But that's okay, this should feel dramatic and weird given the abrasive nature of the band's music and the abrasive nature of the visuals. So I'm almost there in terms of this. What I felt like I wanted though is I made a couple of additional cuts where there was, I'll bring the volume up first actually so you can hear it, a bit of space to add a bit more impact to these stabs by keeping it black in between the footage of the more chaotic moments coming in. So I wanted to fill that with something, so I decided to animate the band's logo in a way that just made the things a bit more interesting, and also it made this feel a bit more like an advertisement. And this was shot the first night of the band's European tour, so it's quite useful to just have a little bit of additional branding involved, I think. So what I did, if I go into my assets folder, is I have this mob file here, Logo Lich V2. I actually animated this in After Effects, which would be a different walkthrough, and basically it would be me following somebody else's tutorial talking you through it, because that's what I did. But I'll link the tutorial down below for that. So here is what the actual animated logo looks like. I probably shouldn't have put it on top of my logo there, that was unfortunate. I wanted to put it on top of some black. So I'll just move all this footage out of the way. There we go. So that's done on a transparent background, and it kind of glitches more or less in time with the band's music. So I just take this and I drop it over and line it up with the gap blackness, so that it kicks in. It's really not quite right. I want it to kick in as soon as the blackness comes in, so that it's in line with that kind of glitch, that stop-start feel. And then I just wait for this next kind of dynamic one here, and just cut the end of that. So that kind of second glitch here lines up with Chad, who's also a handsome boy. Everybody in Frontier is very handsome. It's a bit ridiculous, really. Lines up with his scream, and then as soon as we get Callum, the bass player, not me, because I can't play bass or do anything as it happens, that just cuts in with that, even though you can't really see it because of the strobe. The feeling's there. It feels like it's in the right moment. Again, glitch here in time, more or less, with Chad's vocal. So that then helps build a bit of tension as well, I think, on top of these slightly slower moments before the chaos really kicks in. So if we go to about here, I'll show you. So this kind of, once this breakdown kicks in, that's where the shots get a wee bit longer for that kind of change of pace. And I try and just tie everything to the music at every point. And then I hard cut, and there's a VFX here of VFX effects of a TV transmission sound, I believe, just to give a complete contrast to all the noise you were just battered with. Just this kind of white, intense noise where there's not that much happening. And then I usually throw my own logo in at the end for a bit of advertising for myself in case people look at it. And that's more or less it in terms of the social cut. So I'm just going to quickly run you through that. Let you watch the whole thing. In fact, if I'm going to let you watch the whole thing, I'll make the screen a little bit bigger so you can see what's happening. And you can see from what I was talking about before, well, I'll free up my RAM first of all, so that
it's quite memory consuming, all this throwing rock shapes and stuff. Macs aren't really up to it.
Sometimes, particularly if you're a really intense band like Frontier. So, here we go, we'll do a wee run through, and I'll just quickly talk through. You see these shots again, line up with these stabs, slightly slower, till we get to here, and then it's all a lot more intense. Everything's a lot quicker, sharp movements. Everything is cutting on a snare hit, and I try my best to line up any particular moment. Once we hit here, the shots are getting a little bit longer and a little bit more dramatic because they're longer. There's a bit more kind of flow to them until we hit the dead stop on the crowd, because it almost looks like the camera gets hit here. It doesn't, because Dan is a consummate professional, and then that kind of relief of the
drone at the end. So that's the basis of the social cuts. However, what's also really important is to make sure, if you're making these social cuts, that they are created in the right way for the right kind of platform. Bands have so many platforms now, just making it in one way isn't enough. The usual 1920 1080 looks more cinematic, it's my preferred format, and it's great, but you have to think about how people are going to consume this. If they are on their phones, then you want to make sure you take up the most real estate you possibly can, particularly if you're a band with an Instagram presence, and highly visual content like this works really well on Instagram. I would say you would use the 1920 1080 version of this on Facebook as an ad to lead off to ticket sales. On Instagram, this is just a piece of brand building. Really intense visuals. You want to come to our show, click on the profile, find out more about the band. But also there's now the Instagram stories placement for vertical video, which sometimes I think looks really cool, other times it doesn't. I think it's important with these to supply the band with placements that work for all of them. So very quickly I'm going to show you the original versions that I did. So here's a 1080
by 1350 version for Instagram, and it's all the same footage.
All I've done is render it down into a new sequence, change the sequence size, and then move any of the frames about in the effects panel
to make sure that what I'm looking for is still always in frame. And again, it just basically runs exactly the same logo with an additional logo effect in at the end. And then I also would go into my project and open the story sequence. So this is the more vertical one. And this particular video actually works really well with the vertical footage. It just means if they're going to run it organically or as a paid for ad on stories, you're filling up more of the real estate. It looks a bit more professional, a bit more engaging, it's a bit more in people's faces. And you want your live show to look like something that people can't afford to miss. So that's the strategy component of taking the final edit and building it in these ways.
If you are a band and you have somebody that can help you create content, I would recommend thinking about your channels as much as you can, thinking about different ways to utilise them. Maybe some of them use some things, others use the different things, but most of the tools are free. You're paying, if you're paying anything, in time to your creative. But there's no telling the impact it can have on somebody if they can see 7 or 8 great things that you've done that makes them then want to pick up a ticket to a show, and then they come and they buy your vinyl and they buy your t-shirt. The average rule for marketing is there's about 7 touch points before somebody converts. So 7 great photos, 3 great videos, 4 great photos, all those kind of things could lead to somebody buying your band's merch for the next 20 years, however long your band happens to last. So I would still recommend getting involved, or getting someone involved with helping you create content if you possibly can. Yeah, so I don't know why I looked at the screen there. So that's the process and the rationale behind that social cut video and those social cut videos. If people are interested in more of them, I can talk about more where there's some more post-production in terms of slow-mo and cinematic moves in terms of gimbal work, etc. And if anyone's more interested in strategy, I could do some more talking in how I help bands create all the assets for their release strategies. You can comment down below if you're interested in that, or you can leave me abuse, or both. In fact, if you could do both, that'd be amazing. I would love some really good internet abuse to pass the time.